Hello and welcome. I am honored to introduce today's guest, award-winning British film director and screenwriter whose upcoming film Vindication Swim is set to make its US theatrical debut on October 17th. Elliott Hasler, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me on. I'm good, thanks.
Hey, well, it's a pleasure to have you on. So I want to start off with clearly you hit the ground running since birth. In 2017, at the age of 16, you not only wrote, directed, and acted in your first feature film, WW2 The Long Road Home, you also founded the company Relsa Films. At such a young age, most teens are thinking of boys and girls or just trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. I'd love to hear your inspiration for diving headfirst into filmmaking.
Uh, yeah, I mean, where do I begin really? It's just kind of always been my passion, I suppose. I've loved films well, watching films at least since I was very, very young. And then when I was about 10, the school I was at did this school project where instead of just regular lessons for a week, instead we made a film. And that was kind of my first experience on stepping behind the camera. And, obviously at a very amateur level, but nonetheless, kind of my first experience of making a film and learning kind of how that craft works and, from sort of the pre-production to shooting it and then editing it and stitching something together that's, sort of watchable. So yeah, that was essentially where it all began. And then after that, I started making little films of my own and sort of the quality got better over time. And then, yeah, they kind of led on to doing World War II, The Long Road Home, which, was just an amateur project, that one. It was just friends and family sort of acting in it. I didn't really anticipate it kind of having the life that it had, but then it went on to, get a UK, a US release. It was released in Europe on Paramount Plus last year. So, it kind of had this life of its own that we didn't really anticipate it going on. And then obviously after that, I was able to do Vindication Swim. So it's kind of all been a sort of a long journey up to this point, really.
Hey, well, that's awesome to hear that was like able to kind of open the door. And is there any particular part of like filmmaking or directing or cinematography or screenwriting that you personally are like akin to?
Um, I don't know, but I think for me it's all down to story, really. As long as the story's good and it's something that I resonate with and feel passionate enough about to turn into a film, then for me it doesn't really matter so much in terms of sort of what genre it is or how it's shot necessarily, all that kind of stuff. I think it's all about the story. You sort of shoot it depending on what story you're trying to tell. Likewise, the sort of the genre is dictated to you by the story. So I think for me everything is it's very much centered upon that.
Okay, yeah, and being able to tell us, to me, like I've never filmed anything or besides like TikTok videos, but to be able to tell a story like from directing or screenwriting is just it's a talent in this world for sure. Fast forward 7 years, we now have Vindication Swim, your first professional feature debut. I'd love to hear your process for this film and how it has changed since 2017 when you began.
Well, the script was a lot more sound to begin with on this one. On World War II, it's sort of we had like a very basic outline and it kind of evolved throughout the process, really. There was never kind of a firm script in the sense that you would want one, really, because it was, that was my film school. I never studied film. So I just learned it sort of making that one. That was really where I kind of began to sort of hone my craft, if you like. And then on Vindication Swim, yeah, I put a lot of those things where I, messed up or should have done things differently. Obviously I then knew to correct those points on Vindication Swim. So we had a much tighter script to begin with. I mean, it did still evolve on Vindication Swim, which I think was the nature of filming out on the English channel. It's so unpredictable. So naturally sort of we were reacting to the environment around us and sort of improvising a little in that sense. But essentially it was a lot tighter when we began, just sort of, I think an eye for working with the actors a bit more closely and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of lessons really, but I think the main one was making sure the story was tight before we began.
And did creating or having more of set of a tight script make it easier for you to be able to work with this film?
Yeah, definitely, because you're not firefighting then. You've got your blueprint and you've got your plan, so it makes everything on set, I wouldn't say go smoothly, but a lot smoother, shall we say.
Okay, yeah. I can only imagine like being in charge of all these people and trying to get your vision out there with them helping you accomplish that. And then Vindication Swim is about the true inspirational story of Mercedes Gleitze, the first British woman to swim the English Channel. This film portrayals of Gleitze's upstream struggle in overcoming both the cold waters of the English Channel and the oppressive society of 1920s Britain. To me, that sounds like an amazing premise right there, an inspirational premise. But I'd love to hear what attracted you specifically to the story.
I mean, certainly the inspirational aspect of it was a big draw to me. It is incredibly inspiring what she did and the sort of the traits of perseverance, resilience, determination. I think those are all things that we can be inspired by. And certainly for me as a filmmaker on a much lesser scale, those sorts of qualities of Mercedes Gleitze certainly resonate very strongly. So that was a big draw. We were also born in the same hometown. Mercedes Gleitze was born in Brighton on the south coast of England, but where I was born as well, exactly 100 years apart. She was born in 1900, and then I was born in 2000. So that was a nice synergy, really, that kind of felt. I made me feel very connected to Mercedes Gleitze right from the outset, shall we say? And then, there was also the challenge of filming out at sea. Everything in this film was real. We didn't fake any of it. It was all done as authentically, as genuinely as possible. We were 2 miles out into the English Channel. There were no water tanks, no body doubles, no green screens. It was a feat of endurance to bring it to the screen, really.
Yeah, I saw that it was like a lot of these movies. I'm not throwing shade at anyone, but a lot of these movies they use like screen screens or these tanks where you can go and just shoot all your filming there in that like water sequences. But you actually filmed it all in the English Channel. Like, what made you decide to do that, and how was the process being able to do that?
I think the main reason was to honor Mercedes Gleitze, really. That was kind of the most effective way of doing it. She was a very genuine person. She was very real. So we kind of reflected that in how we made the film. We were, exactly there in the English Channel where she would have swum. And Kirsten Callahan, who plays Mercedes Gleitze, did all her own swimming for the film without any body doubles. So she was in the water sometimes for up to 4 hours at a time. She really kind of suffered for her art in this one, but she was insistent upon doing that. She wanted to represent Mercedes as accurately as possible. When she felt the best way to do that was to do all the swimming.
That's so awesome to hear, because I was going to ask about her too, because this is the first time I've actually seen Kirsten Callahan in anything, and every time the camera like pans over to her, she's just glowing and radiating, and I'm like, wow, this is insane how you were able to achieve this. So it's awesome to hear that she didn't even want to use like a body double, and she was able to just practically do these things herself in like honor of Mercedes. So that's, and also for you being able to shoot it in the English Channel to give that authenticity, it's really refreshing to hear.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, were there any, like filming in this English Channel, were there any safety concerns, or was there the biggest logistical concern that you had during that time?
But yeah, there were safety concerns every time we went out. It's incredibly dangerous being out on the open water filming. So we took a lot of precautions. We had a number of lifeguards. They were always on set at any time. The Coast Guard was notified and everything like that. So people were aware of what we were doing, and we'd taken proper precautions, but nonetheless it is still very dangerous. So we almost lost a producer on one of the shoots. Essentially there was an actor we were shooting with in one of the scenes. He needed to get back for another production, and we were going to swap over, put his body double on the boat, and then carry on shooting. Just we'd already done his close-ups in the morning. And we needed a flat sea with grey skies, which tends to only come in the calm before a storm. So we were sort of trying to get it done as quickly as possible, and then finish before the storm came and get back into shore. I think we probably took a little bit too long, and when we dropped this actor off, as we were getting back onto the boat, it began to rain, and then as we got out of the harbour, it was full-on torrential rain. You couldn't see more than 100 yards. The visibility had just dropped, and the waves had picked up, the wind had picked up. So it was a full-blown storm by that point. And obviously the producer, he'd elected to stay out at sea while we dropped this actor in. So he was sitting in a sort of outboard motor rib little boat with holding the production boat, the rowing boat you see in the film. So he was out there somewhere in this storm, and we had to go out there and try and find him in all of this wind, all of this rain. You just couldn't see a thing. Eventually, after about 20 minutes, felt like a lot longer, but it was about 20 minutes, we come upon these fishing boats that have made this little circle, and in the middle of the circle he's there with the boats, and they're just kind of sheltering him from this weather. So we did find him, and that was the one time we kind of let our guard down in terms of safety precautions and essentially a respect for the English Channel, and it did in return give us a very, very stern warning.
Yeah, and that's got to be tough too when you're seeing like that luminous storm coming on the horizon and it just hits y'all. Glad he was able to make it out like okay, and he's doing well now.
Yeah, he's fine now. I mean, the film wouldn't I don't think would have come about. We hadn't even nearly finished filming at that point, so I think we'd have been dead in the water, if you'll pardon the pun.
True. All right. So, speaking more about Kirsten, how did you work with her to prepare her physically and mentally for the role, especially like for her endurance and during the cold water aspects of the English Channel?
So we got Kirsten an open water swimming coach. She was a competent swimmer before, and she'd done a lot of pool swimming, which was obviously fairly essential to the role that whoever played Mercedes could swim, and which Kirsten could, but just not to the level of Mercedes Gleitze. There are a few who can. So yeah, we got her a coach. We trained her up sort of 3-4 months of intense open water swimming training every single day, and then over the 3 years that it took to make the film, she just carried on training the entire time. So by the end of it, she was an incredible swimmer. She'd really kind of honed the craft.
Let's go. So she actually got more adept at swimming because of the role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, she was a brilliant swimmer. She did a 10K swim after we finished filming for charity, and she still swims now.
Hey, that's awesome to hear. And then the film is also like set in the 1920s. What kind of research went into recreating the 1920s setting? Everything from social attitudes, costumes to newspaper. And were there any surprises that you discovered along the way of filming?
Well, being an independent production with a very small budget, it was very, very difficult to kind of recreate the world of Mercedes as it was in the 1920s. We really were operating on a shoestring, so we just kind of had to look at creative ways of overcoming those problems. Things like the classic cars in the films. What we do would bring up these vintage car clubs. It was COVID at the time, so they weren't really going out and doing the sort of shows they usually go to. So we rang them up and said, "Look, we're doing this film. Would you like to put your car in it? We can't really pay you, but we'll cover your gas and we'll give you lunch and stuff." They said, "Don't worry about the gas, don't worry about the lunch. We just want to put our car in the film." So that 9 times out of 10, they just turn up and they just wanted to be a part of it. And I think that kind of ties into the story really of Mercedes Gleitze and how inspiring it is. So many people on this film, they just wanted to help out. They didn't want anything in return. They just wanted to kind of celebrate this woman and get her story back out there, because she really was a forgotten figure. Not many people had sort of remembered her really from the time. I'd never heard of her growing up. I just kind of stumbled across this story, and I'd say about 90% of the people on the film hadn't heard of her either, and it was through the film, and since there's been a book and all sorts of different things, there's been a kind of this rekindling of her memory really, which has been lovely to see.
Yeah, that's great to hear because I had also not heard of her before like this interview, and being able to kind of research her a little bit more, and just even watching the film and seeing the constant amount of times that she's told no or pushed down or said she can't do something because who she is her resilience is amazing to me. And it seems like it's a superpower in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you think, it hasn't advanced that much in sort of in terms of sort of women's rights. I mean, obviously it's come a long way since Mercedes Day, but there's still these same issues. She was really up against it all. The patriarchy, the class system in Britain, the racism she faced being the daughter of German immigrants sort of after the First World War. So, she really faced so many obstacles. And then to top it all off, she had to battle against Mother Nature itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a overcoming she created, and for your ability to be able to show that in an inspiration kind of like for me, it was like when you're watching a sports movie and it's that last second shot where they shoot it up and it's like going around the rim. That's what I felt here at the end of this movie, and I was like, come on, you got this, you got this. And it's crazy because I've as someone that I've just recently heard of. So props to you for being able to pull that off in this film.
No, thank you. I'm glad you had the experience, that you wanted watching it.
Yeah, it was it was definitely an enjoyable film. And speaking of the theme of vindication is central. After Mercedes Channel Swim, her achievement was challenged. How did you balance portraying her public struggle with the media and skeptics with her internal journey?
I mean, sort of a lot of it is about the kind of the media closing in on her. She's blinded by the flashes from the cameras and the yelling kind of rings in her ears and all that sort of thing. So there was kind of this idea. It sort of tied back into what Mercedes herself had spoke about when I was doing the research about how she's kind of uncomfortable with the fame that Swimming the English Channel had brought. And then obviously when she's accused of cheating, then the kind of the media frenzy that is really kind of unleashed, and she sort of really sees that kind of tabloid hatred unleashed at her. So I mean, that was definitely like an interesting theme within the film to explore, was kind of her relationship with the media and with her own fame really, and how it all kind of comes crashing down. Because she was never interested in the fame. What she wanted to do was swim the English Channel. She was a swimmer, and the fame was kind of a byproduct of her success really.
Yeah, and I thought the way that was portrayed in the film did a great job without me spoiling it, but I thought it did a great job with her reaction towards it because I know if I was in that situation, I would have immediately like, "Oh, you go swim it then," or like deflected to them. But the way she handled it was very inspirational. Looking ahead, what do you hope the legacy of this film will be for Mercedes Gleitze's memory, for women in sport, and for local history in places like Brighton and Kent?
Well, I think mainly what I want this film to achieve is just to inspire people. Not necessarily to go into the water and start swimming, but to just do something. I think Mercedes' story can speak to everybody in terms of those traits that we spoke about. The resilience, the determination, the perseverance. Those are all kind of universal traits that can fit anything in anybody's lives. So I think Mercedes' story is an incredibly powerful one, and I do think there is this real potential for it to inspire people to do good and be the best they can be.
Yep, yep. And that's a great answer there,
Thank you.
because in this world, it's inspiration sometimes can be hard to find and lock into.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mercedes had a lot of it was tough for her. She faced a lot of backlash, a lot of prejudice, and she still managed to achieve her dreams essentially.
I got a random question for you now, based off that too. If you could meet her today and ask her anything in the world, what would you ask her?
That is a really good question. That's not one I've been asked before, so I'm struggling for an answer actually. I think I'd probably ask her, why did you do it? I mean, I have a pretty good idea of why she did what she did. And it sort of tied in with her love of the water. But I'd like to hear it from her. Kind of pick her own brain as to why she went out and decided to do this, because she didn't have to do any of it. And arguably it brought her a lot of trouble. And in later life she sort of became quite reclusive and sort of dropped her swimming past. She was approached by someone in the street once. They were like, "Oh, you're Mercedes Gleitze," and she said, "No, that's not me. You've got the wrong person." And she just really hid away from sort of her legacy and her fame. So I would like to kind of ask her, why did you do all of that?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because like even myself, if I had done something like that, I think I would be shy when someone came up and asked me about it, but I would be like, yeah, I did that. It would be a proud moment. So I would also be curious as to why she wanted to just stay low with it. But then that also makes it feel like it was more meaningful of the actual action itself and less about the outcome of it.
Yeah, very true. She just wanted to swim, and I think that was that was the motivation behind it.
Yeah. And swim she did.
Yeah.
What kind of what kind of emotional journey do you hope audiences go on, and what do you want them feeling as they walk out of the theater after they first see this movie?
But I think that goes back to the idea of being inspired. I mean, yeah, I just think people should go away and sort of take that away from it. Really, there was an extra on the film, which was a really lovely story. She came on and wanted to sort of be a part of it, and just like a small kind of background role. But I sort of spoke to her while we were doing it, and she was saying, "Oh, I've never been in the water before." This was an older lady, probably in her 60s, and having been in the film and sort of witnessed what we were doing and learned more about Mercedes Gleitze, she now swims every single day. She couldn't swim, and now she learned to swim, and she swims constantly. In the pool, in the sea, and I think that's what the whole thing is about. What Mercedes, the power of Mercedes Gleitze's story, really, I think, is kind of embodied in that woman and what she went on to do.
And then inspiring people to that someone that is at the age of 60 and has never swum, and now she's swimming every single day.
Mm.
That it's created that bond within her. Are there any particular scenes, moments, or visual sequences in the film that you're especially proud of?
I think for me, it's the end sequence. That was one of the final things we shot, so it was quite an emotional scene to do. Really, we'd kind of been together as a very tight knit cast and crew for the best part of 3 years, because it took so long to make this film. To get to that point where it was one of the final shots, and also is kind of the final shot in the film where she's arriving back. I don't want to say too much because it kind of spoils the ending if you know what's coming. But yeah, that sequence where she's coming back in and there's all the boats and everything like that. Oh, there goes the poster. but yeah, for me, I think that scene, that final climactic piece, it was kind of it was a nice shoot as well. It was one of the times where everything kind of came together perfectly. The light looked great, the shining off the water. Everyone was kind of giving great performances. I didn't need to sort of do repeat takes and keep directing and stuff. So it was just a dream shoot, really. And then it translated so well on screen.
Yeah, and without me spoiling it as well, I was going to say that that end sequence just brought it all together so well and just flourished. And I'm hoping that people enjoy that same feeling that I was able to feel at the end of that sequence of the movie.
Yeah,
Um,
fingers crossed.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, fingers crossed. I hope audiences do take away kind of your views of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, because it's really a powerful story, and like you said, her influence and her accomplishment means so much this day and age to where women currently are in this world and how we treat them and how we view them and how they're seen in this world. So I think it is a great movie in this day and age, and I think it can cause that inspiration and give that hope that we all love to see. But you were talking about how the film took 3 years. How did filming over such a long timeline, including COVID shutdowns, affect the production? And did it influence any of your filmmaking choices?
Yeah, it definitely. To answer the second point about it influencing the choices, it certainly did because we sort of had these periods in those COVID lockdowns where we couldn't shoot anything. We were kind of grounded. So I did a lot of editing in that time and sort of put together what we'd already shot. And it was quite interesting to kind of do that out of sequence because, normally you do that. And then if you're kind of missing bits, then it's kind of reshooting when you're going back. But obviously we had so much that was left unshot. We're probably about halfway through when that first lockdown hit. So it was quite nice to kind of take stock and then really refine and plan out what was to come. So I think it was quite helpful in that regard to kind of have the luxury of sort of taking a 6 month break really and taking stock of what we'd done. But yeah, it was a long production, longer than, I think anyone on the cast anticipated. When we originally began it, we said, look, it'll be about a month of filming out on the English channel. We'll go out a few times, and that'll be done. And then 3 years later, we're still shooting out there. So yeah, it was a very long journey. And I think it was just the kind of the nature of the production. It was a strange time, obviously, with COVID and everything like that, being there for the majority of the production. But it very much felt like, yeah, sort of a place in time that I don't think really could be replicated again.
Yeah, yeah, and especially during the COVID time, I don't think any of us ever expected the world to be shut down for that amount of time. So I can only imagine from like a director filmmaking standpoint how like much work that much harder that had to make things.
Yeah, I mean, it was very challenging, and you combine that with filming out at sea. This shoot was kind of plagued by difficulty throughout the whole thing, but that kind of ties into Mercedes Gleitze herself. It was very difficult for her, and she persevered, and that was sort of what we did really.
Hey, look at that! It comes full circle.
It does.
All right, Vindication Swim is set to release in New York City on October 17th and in Los Angeles on October 24th. Have you ever been to New York or LA?
I have family who live in sort of the tri-state area, so I've been to New York a couple of times, and then LA as well for work and things. I've been out there. Our composer is based in California, so yeah, I've done a bit of work out there. But both, yeah, great cities.
Okay. Is there any so now that you've like visited them, is there any food that you're looking forward to going to try if you go watch the premiere of your movie?
I want to go to Cat's Deli in New York. I've not been, and everyone kind of raves about it. So I want to go there. I'll probably go while I've seen the movie too many times, so I'll just go there while the movie's playing, and then come back afterwards and do the Q&A.
Okay, okay. Cat Sterling. I've never heard of that one. Is it do you know what kind of food it is?
It's like those pastrami, the pastrami sandwiches that they do.
Oh, okay. And then like another random question during these like Q and A's or like, when your movie is showing, do you feel any nervousness at all or any excitement or anxiety?
Definitely excitement. We did we released in the UK about a year ago, or a bit over a year ago, and we had a big kind of West End premiere when Ronnie Wood of the Rolling Stones was there, and a lot of other people and things. So that was a great kind of place to begin it. And I was very nervous at that one because that was the first time I'd really shown the film to a live audience, and especially being the premiere, we had the press there and the photographers and everything. So that was a big one, and I think I kind of got over the nerves of it essentially on that one. And then we did this big UK kind of tour, taking it around to different cities and things. So yeah, I've kind of got into the swing of it now, but it's going to be great to come out to the US, and we've got different Q&As in different cities all across the States. We've got a couple in Canada as well. So it's going to be a whole new ball game. And, I'm just very excited for interacting with North American audiences on it, see how they, view the film differently and kind of see what their thoughts on it are.
Right, right. Because I know myself, I would be a nervous wreck because if someone makes a certain noise and I'm like, oh, did that mean that he didn't like it? But it's good to hear that you're kind of adapting to how to feel and that it's more so excitement rather than anxiety.
Well, I don't sit in and watch it. I really hate doing that. So for that reason, people are kind of making noises, and I think you end up watching the audience more than you're watching the film because you've
Yeah.
seen the film so many times. So I don't go in. I go and find a bar nearby or something and wait in there until the film's finished.
Okay, okay. Okay, this is another random question. So Mercedes swam the English Channel on October 7th, 1927, 98 years ago on the 7th of October of this year, and Vindication Swim is set to release to have in the US on October 17th. Was the timing intentional to align with the anniversary of her achievement, or was it just a happy coincidence?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out that it was going to be that part of the year that we were releasing it. So I said let's do it around the anniversary, and luckily the distributor was very keen on that. And we're actually the digital release on November the 18th. That is her 125th birthday. So we've kind of aligned everything with sort of Mercedes Gleitze. Yeah, it's all Mercedes Gleitze themed essentially. The release, to go with the film.
That is so awesome to hear. Because
Mm.
I've even like researching a little bit about her. I heard that she actually created a charity that still stands to this day and is called what is it? Mercedes Gleitze Relief in Need of Charity. So I thought that was pretty cool that she donated a lot of her funds to this charity for a good cause. It just seems like she's such a very kind-hearted, genuine person.
Absolutely. She never took anything. Everything was about giving back, and the charities, sort of epitomizes that really. That she was, keen on supporting the homeless, and and that it still goes to this day, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the inspiration that I hope people are able to kind of pick away from this one too. Yeah, what she did was very amazing and fantastic and truly legendary. I don't think I would have been able to do that, but even so, for her to be able to achieve such greatness and then still kind of push away the popularity gained from it is just truly remarkable, in my opinion. But that's pretty much all I have today. So, Elliot, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been such an inspiring conversation, and I know our listeners are going to be excited to see Vindication Swim when it hits theaters on October 17th. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you're working on right now that you'd like to people to know about? And where can your listeners follow your work or stay up to date with what you've got coming out next?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of other films on the go at the moment. They're both in pre-production. We're sort of raising the funds. One's a true crime thriller set in England on the south coast of the 1930s, and then the other one is a survival thriller set during the First World War. So both kind of historical projects, keeping in that kind of same vein as Vindication Swim. But yeah, we're just raising the funds for those at the moment. And then if people want to keep up to date with sort of my career and how the film's going, then just follow us on Instagram. Mine's just my name, Elliott Hasler, and then Vindication Swim is at Vindication Swim Film.
Okay. Elliott Hasler on Instagram. And then one more random question that you just said historical projects. I see your kind of theme of sticking to historical projects and movies. What has inspired you to stay with history and rather than just go to the nonfiction route of just these, or I'm sorry, the fiction route of movies?
I think there's something quite cool about working on a historical film. It was kind of like this on Vindication Swim, and we did the big street scenes and that sort of thing. You walk onto set, and there's like load of vintage cars. There's all these people in these old costumes and stuff, and it almost feels like you've been transported back in time, which is a very cool experience. Really, I just don't think there's no other kind of industry where you could experience that really, other than on a film set. And it's just the most surreal experience. You're standing there and there's like this old motorbike going by and like a horse and cart and all these characters walking around as if it is the 1920s. So it's really quite surreal. I love that. I think it's just an incredible kind of thing to experience. So yeah, I'm partly that aspect. And I'm also kind of drawn to these sorts of stories, historical stories of ordinary people who've gone on to do these extraordinary things. So I think it's a kind of a combination of the both of them really. There's some kind of like cool, slightly childish element of me wanting to kind of go back in time, it's like a time machine almost, and then kind of to have these amazing stories of the past and to be bringing them to life again in a film. I think are kind of those are the two factors that kind of make me want to make those sorts of movies.
Okay, that's awesome to hear because I would love to like when you put it in that way, I would love to be able to like just be on a set and see like this old fashioned kind of world that we didn't get to exist in and just see it from our perspective and just appreciate its greatness. So that's a great answer. All right. Once again, I appreciate you for coming on. This was a very enjoyable experience. Vindication Swim comes out in theaters October 17th. Be sure to check it out. I was able to watch it a little early, and I loved it. I loved it. It was very inspirational and very, I think, needed in this day and age. So, Elliot, once again, thank you for joining.
Thank you, and thanks for your kind words about the film.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. And